education, the meaning of scientific tendency is to include and also give a prominent place to scientific subjects. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi students, how are you today? It is nice to see you again in this channel, Kuliah Teknokrat with me, Miss Dia. In this occasion, I would like to tell you about one interesting topic in educational philosophy, which is about the scientific tendency in education. Before we go further discussing about this topic, I think it is better for you all to know the objectives of today's session. So, in this session, there are 4 objectives. The first is students are expected to define scientific tendency and then also explain the brief history about scientific tendency in education. And then the next one, the students are expected to be able to describe the scientific tendency as a philosophy in education. And then the third one, the students are expected to be able to tell about the protagonists and also their roles in the development of scientific tendency in education. And the last one is the students are expected to be able to mention the characteristics of scientific tendency. Now, let's start with the first point about the definition and also the brief history of scientific tendency. So apparently, the phrase of scientific tendency does not indicate any philosophical implications. However, the facts are otherwise. This phrase has come into existence after a very long philosophical considerations by the philosophers, scientists, and also the intellectuals between around 15th to 18th centuries, and how it is dominant factors in all walks of life and so in education. Okay, in education, the meaning of scientific tendency is to include and also give a prominent place to scientific subjects. The experts of this tendency believe that only by the study of scientific subjects as individual can lead a full and also complete life. Due to scientific researches and wonderful inventions in the 15th century and also the 16th century, scientific tendency began to take roots and also grow in the 17th century. And during those days, Latin and also Greek literature monopolized the top place in the prevalent curriculum. And the supporters of scientific tendencies began to disturb against this monopoly and also argued about scientific subjects. So the people at the time could live their life successfully according to the changed circumstances and also situations of the society. But the believers of academic education opposed this demand. As a consequence, up to the 18th centuries, no proper place was assigned to scientific subjects in the curriculum. However, it is not the end. There were many philosophers and scientists support scientific tendencies at that time, and until there were many scientific researchers and also inventions under the impact of industrial revolutions. In its history, the greatest credit to popularize the scientific tendency in the field of education goes to Herbert Spencer, who is his lectures and writings established the importance of scientific subjects of complete living. Due to his efforts, scientific subjects began to occupy an important place in the curriculum. It is influenced by Spencer. Other thinkers and also experts at the time, like Huxley and also Eliot, supported the scientific tendency more and more. Gradually, the famous universities like Oxford and also Cambridge University opened departments of scientific studies, and provisions were made at the time in the curriculum of the secondary educations and also for scientific subject. And time by time, like Germany and also France and USA and other countries of Europe at the time also realized the importance of scientific studies and also made provisions for the curriculum of primary and secondary and also the higher educations of their countries. So that's the brief history of scientific tendency development in the world. So what is actually the correlations between scientific tendency and also educations? Now, let's talk about it. Scientific tendency is regarded as one of the philosophies in educations. It is the continuation movement sponsored by sense realisms of 17th and also 18th century. So what is actually sense realism? Sense realism here was developed in the 17th century, and then this ideology had some roots of the modern educational theory of today. And then this believes that knowledge primarily comes through the senses, not from words. As such, in the educations of the child, his ears and also mouth, skin, and also limbs should be freely used to the maximum. And without exercising his senses, organ, no knowledge will be gained by the child. The upholders of sense realisms in the 17th century come to believe that all knowledge originated from the external nature. Hence, the education should adopt real and also effective method instead of artificial techniques. According to this tendency, truth can only be gained by observations and also contacts between senses and also external objects. And this is the natural way of being educated. Educations should provide more and more opportunities to the children to observe and also to study natural phenomena and also come in contact with external natural objects through the senses. Then the child will be able to gain knowledge of natural objects, natural phenomena, and also natural laws. At the time, there were also new changes and also revolutionary transformations affected the system of educations. So those are the first, mother tongue as the medium of instruction. And then the second one, more importance in observations of nature and also study of scientific subjects in place of language, literature, and also humanities. The third one, more emphasis on useful and also practical education. The next, help from psychological findings and also researches. And the last one is deductive method, more important than inductive method. So those transformations are based on the philosophy of the scientific tendencies for educational system. In that era, there were also many experts who support scientific tendency. However, in this meeting, I'm going to tell you two protagonists, the most famous protagonists of scientific tendency who are influential to the development of scientific tendency in education. So here are the protagonists of scientific tendency. The first is John Amos Comenius. So he lives around 1592 until 1670. John Amos Comenius is actually the prophet of modern education, philosophers, education, and also textbook writer. He believed that education was the supreme means of human progress and worked all his life to transmit this idea to all. Comenius was an acute observer of the growth of plants and also animals, the natural activities and interests of children, and also the operation of the crafts and manual arts. He formed a theory of mental life and also the growth of child nature. He believed that the process of natural growth of the children must be the true basis of education. One of his chief contributions to educational science is that he believed that educations must be according to the stage of the development of the children. He could understand the needs and also interests and powers of comprehensions of children at each stage of development. Therefore, at that time, he prepared a textbook for year by year for the school life according to the needs and interests of the children. Comenius believes that man has capacity to know and to do all things, and that has a relation to God. According to him, the aim of education is to teach people everything. He believes that education has the power to regenerate human life. He regards education as the necessary process by which the children are also human. He wants that education should begin from the very birth of the child and not from the time when he starts going to school. In terms of students' working time, Comenius does not like that young children should be required to work for 6 or 8 continuous hours. He wants that younger children should work for 4 hours a day and older ones for 6 hours a day. No homework should be given. So there is no homework should be given to the children or students. The tasks demanding more of intellectual and also memory should be done in the morning, and then while handwork and also music and practices of style mainly in the afternoon. All his regulation indicates how strikingly Comenius has anticipated many of the modern practices. Comenius may be regarded as the actual founder to the modern methods of instructions. He wanted to spread the instruction surely and thoroughly, certainly and clearly, and easily and pleasantly. Therefore, he has carefully analyzed the principle that will help in achieving the result. In this case, he has prescribed certain rules of teaching, such as things of practical applications in life should be given primary place in education. And then the next one, children must be encouraged to learn by doing. The third one, Comenius proposed that whatever is learned should be taught by one student to another, so that no knowledge may remain unused. So Comenius wants to encourage the students to tell others what they have learned before, because he believes that teaching others is an excellent device, excellent thing for clarifying and fixing what one is learning. And the next one, the material learned should be properly combined and integrated. Comenius has the opinion that the number of senses and also faculties should work together. The principle of integration had led Comenius to believe that all training gives from not only to the material, but at the same time to the selfhood of the children as well. So those are the principles and also rules of method which Comenius has prescribed mainly in the great didactic that he has already created. He was not only a theorist, but a practitioner also. And he tested the validity of his principle and also rules in the actual classroom. He believes that the applications of his method will make the school a place of happiness and joy instead of a place of boredom. The next protagonist, the second protagonist in scientific tendency is Herbert Spencer. So Herbert Spencer lived around 1820 until 1903. His contribution is so great that even today he is rightly recognized as the chief protagonist of scientific tendency. Spencer was born on 17th April 1820 in England in the famous town called Derby. His early education was supervised by his uncle and not by his father. Hence, by his own efforts, Spencer gained a good knowledge of arithmetic and also science, economics, and others up to the age of 17. And he was thinker by nature. In 1850, he published his book entitled Social Statistic, and then he became a famous writer after that. Spencer was an educator before he became a philosopher. He was a skilled teacher as well as a profound philosopher. To prepare the individual for complete living, Spencer stated that education should achieve the goal of complete living, and also the harmonious development of all aspects of personality so that a child is able to solve all the problems of life and lead a complete happy life. Spencer also points out there are three main striking differences in discipline and training. Discipline aims at correcting the immediate behavior of the child in the classroom. Training aims at the formations of ultimate character. Discipline is only a temporary measure, whereas training is actually a continuous, and also its intentions may be realized long after the child is trained. So according to Spencer, a child is not morally developed since birth. In his opinion, he possesses many devilish tendencies in the beginning, so that the primary task of education is to reform and also to sublimate these oral tendencies and thus develop the child morally. Spencer has also emphasized that a child learns many things by imitation only. Therefore, parents and also teachers should understand the nature of children and try to put before him high ideals of conduct and characters by their own example of thoughts and also actions, so that the children are able to learn moral qualities of goodness, follow feeling, cooperation, sympathy, and also tolerance, etc. Besides that, Spencer also proposed method of teaching that can be used by teacher to teach in the classroom. He emphasized that teaching methods should be based on these principles. So what are the principles? The first, from known to unknown. And then the second one, from simple to complex. The third one, from a definite to indefinite. And then the fourth one, from concrete to abstract. The next one, from direct to indirect. The next, follow the culture theory. Next one, emphasis on self-learning. The next, method of teaching should be interesting. And the last one, from empirical to rational. So those are the principles offered by Spencer. A teacher should provide education to suit mental makeup and also age of the child, as well as his inherent tendencies. It should be remembered that Herbert Spencer's say before that from empirical to rational. So it has made the methodology of teaching quite scientific. So it is called a scientific tendency. On the basis of educational philosophy of main advocates of scientific tendency, particularly of views expressed by various aspects of education by Comenius and also Herbert Spencer, we can conclude that there are several main characteristics of scientific tendency. So what are they? The first is opposition to literary educations. So scientific tendency opposes literary education and proposes practical and useful knowledge. The second one, importance of science in curriculum. Scientific tendency attaches special importance to scientific subjects in the curriculum. It supports hold the view of the only after the study of scientific subjects, a man can lead a complete life. And then the third characteristic is emphasis on curriculum. So this tendency lays more stress upon curriculum in preference to method. Its protagonists or experts in this tendency believe that the lack of proper curriculum will spoil education. However, effective methods might be. The next characteristic is freedom in the selections of the subject. This tendency advocates the provisions of full freedom to the child in the selections of subjects for the study. The next, about knowledge of nature through science. This tendency emphasizes that true and real knowledge of nature can be gained only through the study of scientific subject. The next characteristic, importance of inductive method. So scientific tendency advocates the use of inductive method in all educational procedures, processes, and experiences. The next is the need of love and also sympathy. This tendency lays great emphasis of love, sympathy, and helping attitude towards children while educating them. And then the meaning of liberal education. So the scientific tendency interprets education in a new sense. In the words of Monroe, liberal education is that which is essential for vocation and also citizenship and prepares the individual for various tasks and functions of life. The next characteristic is importance of concrete and direct objects. According to these tendencies, only the concrete and also direct objects are true. Abstract, the unseen one, and also the unknown objects are not that important. And then the last characteristics, according to the belief of scientific tendency, is development of scientific attitude. So modern life demands a scientific attitude towards life and also society. Scientific tendency promotes this scientific attitude in child. So, well, that's all our material for today. So, before I end this meeting, there's a saying from Comenius which says, "Nothing should be learned solely for its value at school, but for its use in life." Okay, thank you so much for joining these sessions. See you again on the next meeting with our latest material, which is about modern humanism in education. See you again. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and goodbye.
Terima kasih sudah menyaksikan video pembelajaran ini. Jangan lupa like, komen, dan subscribe, serta nyalakan tanda loncengnya agar kalian tidak ketinggalan informasi update lainnya. I hate body.